A son leaves his elderly mother abandoned in a cemetery alone, soaked and with nothing, and when he finally comes back, what happens next proves this. The pain of being forgotten by the people we love most can cut deeper than any wound you can. See, Helen was 72 when she realized that to her only child she had become a burden. The municipal cemetery in Santa Monica, California, was nearly empty on that Tuesday afternoon. Heavy clouds promised rain, and a salty ocean wind pushed a damp chill straight into her bones. Helen gripped her worn purse and scanned the rows of headstones while she waited for Ryan to return from the restroom. She had begged him to come with her to visit his father's grave, her late husband, Michael. It had been 3 years since Michael died from a sudden heart attack, leaving Helen alone in a small, aging apartment near Ocean Park. Ryan was 45, a real estate agent who complained about everything: traffic clients, his wife, his teenagers, and most of all, his mother. To him, Helen wasn't mom. She was a responsibility he resented. His weekly visits became every other week, then monthly, then almost nothing. When Helen called, he answered with barely hidden irritation, always rushed, always busy, never able to spare even 5 minutes. That day, Helen had pleaded, calling 3 times before he picked up. She wanted to place fresh flowers on Michael's headstone and say a prayer. She missed companionship and conversation so much that even talking to a cold slab of stone felt better than the silence at home. Ryan sighed into the phone, muttered about commitments, but eventually gave in. He picked her up on a rainy morning, drove in silence while she tried to make small talk about the grandkids, the neighborhood, anything to fill the empty space between them. The cemetery felt deserted. A groundskeeper far away tended a patch of flowers, and a woman in black stood on the other side of the grounds. Helen walked slowly to the family plot, her tired steps echoing. She knelt with difficulty and straightened the bouquet, wiping dust from the marble with the sleeve of her coat. Ryan stood beside her, scrolling on his phone, clearly impatient. "Mom, I'm going to the restroom real quick. I'll be right back." Helen nodded, focused on her prayer. She heard his footsteps crunching away on gravel, and stayed on her knees, speaking softly to her husband about loneliness, about missing him, about how distant Ryan had become. Tears ran down her wrinkled cheeks as she poured out her heart to someone who could no longer answer. 10 minutes passed, then 15, then 20. Helen struggled up, one hand braced on the headstone, and looked around for her son. The cemetery felt even emptier now. The wind picked up. Cold drops began to fall. She walked toward where she thought the restrooms were, but there was no sign of Ryan. She called out, her thin voice fighting the wind. "Ryan, honey, where are you?" Silence only, the groan of iron gates and the whisper of leaves. A tightness clenched her chest. The cemetery was large, with intersecting paths, old chapels, and statues of angels that looked like they were crying. Helen didn't know her way around. Michael was buried there because it was the city's oldest cemetery, and his family had owned a plot there since his grandparents' time. The rain fell harder. Helen didn't have an umbrella. Ryan had taken the only one from the car. She tried to shelter under a broad tree, shivering. With trembling fingers, she pulled out her old phone, the one Ryan gave her last birthday, while complaining she never learned how to use it. She tried to call him. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then went to voicemail. She tried again, voicemail. Again, voicemail. And if this story is hitting you in the heart, subscribe to the channel and hit like so you don't miss the next one. Tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. Helen's heartbeat sped up. A strange fear, one she refused to name, rose inside her. She fought the wind and rain back toward the parking lot. It was empty. Ryan's car was gone. Helen stood there, drenched, staring at the space where the car had been. It couldn't be real. He wouldn't do that, not to her, not to his own mother. She called again, voicemail. Again, voicemail. The rain turned the cemetery into something darker, lonelier. Her coat clung heavy to her shoulders, gray hair plastered to her face. She stumbled back under the tree, shaking uncontrollably, trying to make sense of it. Ryan couldn't have abandoned her. Something must have happened in emergency. Maybe he had to run home and would come back. Yes, that had to be it. But 20 more minutes crawled by and nothing changed. The cemetery was closing. A uniformed employee approached with a large umbrella. "Ma'am, are you okay? We're locking the gates in a few minutes." Helen looked at him with frightened eyes, her voice trembling. "My son. He went to the restroom and never came back. His car isn't in the parking lot." The man frowned and glanced around. "What kind of car? A silver Corolla. He said he'd be right back." The employee shook his head. "I saw a car like that leave about 40 minutes ago. I thought everyone had gone. Do you want me to call someone?" Helen went quiet as reality finally dropped like a stone. Ryan had left her there alone, without money, without help. She opened her purse with shaking hands. She had only $12 in her wallet. Her phone battery was low. She didn't know anyone in Santa Monica besides her son. The employee, his name tag read ED, saw her silent panic. "Come with me, ma'am. Let's go to the guard booth while we figure this out." Helen followed slowly, her soaked shoes squishing with every step. The booth was small but dry with a space heater. Ed offered her a chair and an old towel. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what happened. My son, he wouldn't do this to me." But even as she said it, she knew she was lying to herself. For months, she'd felt Ryan's growing coldness, his impatience, the way his eyes rolled when she asked for anything. The last time she visited his home, she accidentally overheard an argument between Ryan and his wife Patricia. "I can't do this anymore," Pat Ryan snapped. "She calls every day, complains about everything, wants attention nonstop. I work, I have problems, kids, I can't take care of her too." Patricia answered quietly, but Helen still heard it. "She's your mom, Ryan. She's getting old. She's alone." "And what do you want me to do?" Ryan shot back. "Drop everything to babysit a stubborn old woman who refuses assisted living. I've told her 1,000 times." The words had stabbed Helen like blades. She pretended she heard nothing, said goodbye, normally went home and cried all night. Assisted living. He wanted to put her away, get rid of her like an old object that no longer mattered. Ed broke into her thoughts. "Do you have anyone else we can call family friends?" Helen shook her head. "Just my son. My sister lives in Florida, but we haven't talked in years. Most of my friends are gone, or as frail as I am." She tried Ryan again. This time the call didn't even ring. His phone was off, or he had blocked her. The truth was brutal and plain. Her son had intentionally abandoned her in a cemetery in the rain. Night fell over Santa Monica, bringing a sharper cold. Ed couldn't leave Helen in the booth all night, but he also couldn't bring himself to send her away. He called his wife Cindy, explained everything, then hung up and looked at Helen. "Ma'am, would you be okay coming to our place? It's not fancy, but my wife says we can give you a hot meal and get you dry. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do." Tears returned instantly. The kindness of a stranger hurt almost as much as the cruelty of her own child. "I don't want to be a burden," Helen said. "A burden," Ed replied. "No, we're not leaving you out here." Their home was in a modest neighborhood, a narrow street, lined with small houses. Cindy waited at the door, warm, round-faced, gentle-eyed. She took Helen straight to the bathroom, handed her dry clothes, a fluffy towel, shampoo. "Take a hot shower, sweetheart. Warm your body. Then we'll talk." Helen obeyed, letting the heat wash away the rain, the cold, and a little of the shock. When she came out wearing an oversized nightgown, Cindy lent her the table was set with simple, plentiful food, rice, beans, stewed chicken, salad, comfort on a plate. They ate quietly for a few minutes, then Cindy asked, blunt but not cruel. "What happened, Helen? Did your son really leave you there?" Helen lowered her head, shame mixing with pain. "I think, yes. He hasn't been happy with me for a while. He thinks I'm a burden. He talked about putting me in a home." Ed slammed his hand on the table. "That's disgusting. What kind of son does that?" Cindy touched his arm to calm him and turned back to Helen. "Do you have somewhere to stay?" "My apartment," Helen said. "But I don't have money for a ride home. I only had $12. "Then tomorrow morning Ed will drive you," Cindy said firmly. "Tonight you sleep here on the couch. Not perfect, but it's warm." Helen started crying, quiet at first, then uncontrollable. All the fear, humiliation, and shock finally collapsed on top of her at once. Cindy stood and wrapped her in a hug, letting her cry into her shoulder. "Cry, sweetheart. Let it out. And remember, you're not alone. God puts good people in our path when we need them most." That night Helen barely slept. On the clean couch, under a blanket that smelled faintly of lavender, she stared at the ceiling and replayed everything. How did it come to this? Where did she go wrong, raising Ryan that he could become capable of such cruelty? She remembered him as a child glued to her side, calling mommy in that small voice. She remembered sleepless nights when he was sick, the sacrifices she and Michael made to give him a good education, how proud they were when he got into college. Where did that boy go? The next morning, bright sunlight mocked the storm inside her. Cindy made breakfast, toast coffee with milk fruit. Ed ate quickly, grabbed his keys. "Let's get you home, Helen. I know Ocean Park." During the 20-minute drive, Helen watched the city wake up, people jogging, families walking dogs, everything normal, while her world felt shattered. Outside her old 5-story building, she thanked Ed until her voice shook. "You were angels," she said. "I'll never forget." Ed squeezed her hand. "You don't owe me a thing. Just take care of yourself. And here, call us if you need anything." He gave her a paper with his number scribbled on it. Helen tucked it safely into her purse and climbed the stairs slowly, stopping twice to catch her breath. When she opened her apartment door, she was greeted by the same heavy silence that waited for her every day. The place was small, 1-bedroom, living room, kitchenette, bathroom, clean but worn. Family photos on the walls showed happier years. Helen sat on the couch and checked her phone, clinging to a tiny spark of hope that Ryan had called, texted, apologized, explained some terrible misunderstanding. Nothing. No missed calls. No messages. She dialed him anyway. This time he answered. Helen's heart leapt. Ryan, thank God, I was so worried. What happened yesterday? Why did you leave? His voice cut through her like ice. Mom, I'm done. Done pretending. Done carrying you. Done with the calls, the complaints, the constant needs. You have to understand I have my life, my family, my problems. Helen felt her lungs stop working. I'm your mother. I'm not asking for much, just a little attention, a little. You're asking for too much, Ryan snapped. I work all day. I have 2 teenagers who drive me crazy, a wife on my case bills, and then I'm supposed to visit you, drive you around, listen to you talk about loneliness. I can't do it anymore. But you left me alone in a cemetery. In the rain. With nothing. Ryan paused, then spoke even colder. I did it so you'd finally get it. Get it that you can't depend on me anymore. You need to find your own solutions, assisted living friends, anything, just leave me in peace. The words hit Helen like punches. She could barely breathe. How can you say that I raised you? I gave up so much for you and I appreciate it, Ryan said. But that was your job. You chose to have me. I didn't ask to be born, and now I'm choosing to live my life without you being a permanent weight on my back. Helen ended the call, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. She collapsed into deep sobs, hugging a pillow to her chest. His rejection hurt worse than any physical pain she'd ever known, as if her heart had been ripped out while still beating. The next days were the darkest of Helen's life. She barely left bed. She ate little. She ignored the phone. The few calls were telemarketers or her downstairs neighbor, Loretta, an 0-year-old, even lonelier than she was. A week after the cemetery, Helen was in the kitchen making tea when someone knocked hard on her door. Reluctantly, she opened it. Loretta stood there with her Walker face lined with worry. Helen, honey, I haven't seen you in a week. I was scared. I'm fine, Helen lied. Just tired. Loretta looked her up and down and shook her head. You're lying. Your eyes are swollen from crying. You're thinner. What happened? Helen tried to smile, failed, and tears returned. My son. He doesn't want me anymore. She told her everything, the cemetery, the cruel phone call, the feeling of being disposable. Loretta listened in silence, then sighed. Ungrateful kids have always existed, sweetheart. I have 3. You know where they are. 1 in San Francisco, 1 in New York, 1 overseas. They call twice a year, my birthday and Christmas, if that. You learn to live with it. How do you survive that loneliness? Loretta gave a sad smile. You adjust. You build small pleasures, small routines. I watch my shows, I tend my plants, I talk to neighbors. It's not the life I dreamed of, but it's the life I have. Helen wiped her tears. I don't think I'm as strong as you. You are, Loretta said gently. And you know why, because you don't have a choice. Life keeps going whether we agree or not. And while you're alive, you have to live, if only to prove to those ungrateful kids that we're stronger than they think. Those words planted a tiny seed in Helen's wrecked heart. Maybe she really did need to learn to live without Ryan. Maybe she needed a new purpose, a reason to get up each morning. That afternoon, Helen did something she hadn't done in months. She went for a walk. Slowly down the stairs, out the building toward the beach. The boardwalk was busy people, exercising families, strolling vendors selling coconut water and popsicles. The ocean was calm and blue. Helen sat on a bench and simply watched the waves, feeling the breeze on her face. Another older woman approached, walking a small dog on a leash. Beautiful day, isn't it? Helen nodded. The woman sat beside her. I've lived here 20 years, and I never get tired of this view. I'm Yvonne. Helen, she replied. They chatted about small things. Yvonne said she was widowed and lived alone. Her children visited rarely. The story felt painfully familiar. Helen felt an immediate connection. Do you come here often? Yvonne smiled. Almost every day. I sit here, watch the ocean, talk to whoever sits nearby. It's my therapy. Better than staying home chewing on sadness. In the days that followed, Helen built a new routine. Every morning she dressed, walked to the boardwalk, and almost always found Yvonne on the same bench with her dog Toto. Their friendship grew real, sharing life stories, grieving distant children, remembering better years. Yvonne introduced Helen to others. Marlene, a retired teacher who led free stretching classes for seniors. Oscar, a 5-year-old, who played guitar and sang old songs. Teresa, who sold homemade sweets and always had kind words. For the first time in months, Helen felt like she belonged. That group, each of them neglected or forgotten in some way, had built their own improvised family. They supported each other, shared simple meals, helped with medicine when someone forgot theirs, showed up for birthdays with cheap cake and sincere hugs. One afternoon with coconut water, Yvonne asked about Ryan. He still hasn't called. Helen shook her head. No. And I haven't called him either. He made it clear how he feels. Yvonne sighed. We have expectations. We think because we gave our lives to our kids, they'll repay us with endless gratitude. But life doesn't work that way. They have their lives, their problems, their families. Some can balance it and still care for parents. Others can't or simply don't want to. The question is, will you spend the rest of your life waiting for him to change, or will you build a new life with people who actually care? That night, Helen did something symbolic but powerful. She gathered every photo of Ryan displayed. Around her living room, placed them in a box and stored it on the top shelf of her closet. It wasn't forgetting. It was freeing herself from letting his absence control every corner of her home and mind. The next day, Marlene invited her to join the stretching class. Come on, Helen. It's good for the body and the soul. We move, we laugh, we talk. Free therapy. Helen agreed, going 3 times a week. The exercises were gentle but helped. She felt more awake, less stiff, more alive. Oscar asked her to sing with him. Helen laughed and said she couldn't sing, but he insisted. Nobody here is a pro. It's for fun. For the first time in decades, Helen sang off-key, shy at first, then louder old songs she'd known since she was young. She laughed when she forgot lyrics, clapped when Oscar played a beautiful solo, and felt a lightness she'd forgotten existed. 2 months after the cemetery, Helen was almost unrecognizable, not only thinner and stronger from exercise, but emotionally. Her eyes held light again. Smiles came easier. She stood straighter. She helped Teresa make sweets to sell, never missed Marlene's classes, sang with Oscar, and became inseparable from Yvonne. They ate lunch together in small cafes, talked for hours on the beach bench, shared fears and hopes. One day, Marlene arrived, excited. Guys, the city's community arts center is offering free painting classes for seniors. Should we sign up? The whole group loved the idea. Helen had never painted in her life, but she wanted to try. Classes were twice a week. The instructor, Julia, was young, patient, encouraging. Helen discovered she had a gift. Her first attempts were messy colors, bleeding shapes uneven, but Julia always found something to praise. Look at this color choice, Helen. And that brush stroke has personality. With practice, Helen improved. She painted beach scenes, still lifes, and a little portrait of Toto that made Yvonne cry. Painting felt like therapy, each stroke washing a little pain out of her chest and onto the canvas. During all that time, Helen had no contact with Ryan. He didn't call, text, or show up, and as time passed, she missed him less. The wound remained, but it healed enough that it no longer paralyzed her. Then one Saturday, while Helen painted at home, her phone rang. "Unknown number?" She answered. "Mrs. Helen, this is Patricia, Ryan's wife." Helen tensed. "Hi, Patricia." Patricia sounded awkward, guilty. "I wanted to apologize. For what happened. For what Ryan did. I didn't agree with it, but he was so stubborn," Patricia. Helen said gently. "You don't need to apologize for him. Everyone is responsible for their own choices." "I know," Patricia whispered, "but I wanted you to know it wasn't a family decision. It was his. And I'm sorry. The kids miss you. They ask about you." Helen's heart tightened, thinking about her grandchildren, Gabe and Lily. "How are they?" Patricia told her how they'd grown, how Gabe was in high school, now Lily in middle school. They want to see you." "Does Ryan know you're calling?" Patricia paused. "No. He'd be furious. But this is wrong, Mrs. Helen. You're their grandma. You're my mother-in-law. It shouldn't be like this." Helen breathed slowly. "I appreciate you calling, truly. But I don't want to damage your marriage. If Ryan doesn't want to see me, I won't force it. When he's ready, if he ever is, he knows where to find me." Still, Patricia's call stirred something in Helen. For days she couldn't stop thinking about Gabe and Lily, how many birthdays she'd missed, school, events, milestones. Yvonne noticed her distraction. Helen confessed the call. Yvonne listened, then asked softly, "Do you want to see your grandkids?" "Of course," Helen said, "but I won't humiliate myself begging." Yvonne's eyes sparkled with mischief. "What if you saw them without going through Ryan? How do you remember where they go to school?" Helen thought she vaguely remembered the name from years ago. "I think so." "Then don't cause trouble," Yvonne said. "Stand at a safe distance near pickup, just to see them from far away, just to breathe again." It was risky. It was tempting. The next Thursday, Helen dressed carefully and went to the school. She stood across the street, partially hidden behind a tree, waiting. At 330, the gates opened and students poured out laughing. Helen searched anxiously, then saw them. Gabe first, tall, skinny, messy hair, huge backpack. He looked so much like Ryan at that age that her chest ached. Lily came out right after talking animatedly with a friend, laughing at something on her phone. They were so grown, so different. Helen stood there with tears running down her face. She couldn't call them, couldn't approach, but she could see them healthy, alive. They climbed into Patricia's car and drove away. Helen stayed for a few minutes, shaking with emotion, happiness to see them, sadness to not hold them. She went home exhausted. That night, unable to sleep, she thought about everything: Ryan, the kids, the absurdity of her life, but also Yvonne, Marlene, Oscar, Teresa, her chosen family. The painting classes, the mornings on the boardwalk, how her life had changed. Maybe life wasn't about getting everything we want, but about finding joy in what we have. And she had community, friends, purpose. Not what she imagined for old age, but real, sincere hers. November arrived humid and warm. Helen would turn 73 on the 15th. Yvonne insisted on a small party. Nothing big, just our group. Cake, snacks. We celebrate life, Helen. Helen resisted at first, but finally agreed. The party was at Marlene's home on a spacious veranda with an ocean view. On her birthday morning, Helen woke with a strange feeling: 73. How many birthdays had she shared with Ryan? Since he was a baby, they always celebrated. Michael always bought a special cake. Ryan sung happy birthday off-key but loud. Now her son probably wouldn't even remember the date. Helen pushed the thought away, put on a floral dress. Yvonne helped her find at a nice thrift shop, fixed her hair, added soft lipstick. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself. There was life in her face again. The party was simple but beautiful: balloons, flowers, homemade cake. Teresa made a delicious rolled cake with caramel filling. Oscar brought his guitar and made everyone laugh with a funny version of Happy Birthday. The gifts were small but meaningful. New paintbrushes from Marlene, a handmade scarf from Teresa, a poetry book from Yvonne. Surrounded by these people, her chosen family, Helen felt deep gratitude. Life had hurt her badly, but it also gave her a second beginning, a chance to discover she was stronger than she ever believed, to find joy in unexpected places. In the middle of the party, Helen's phone rang. Patricia. Helen hesitated, then stepped aside to answer. "Happy birthday," Patricia said softly. "I know it's today. I couldn't let it pass." "Thank you," Helen whispered. "That's very kind. The kids want to talk to you." "Can I put them on?" Before Helen could reply, she heard Lily's voice. Grandma, is it you?" Helen's tears came instantly. "Yes, sweetheart, it's me. I miss you so much. Why did you disappear? Why don't you come see us?" Helen didn't know what to say. She refused to speak badly about Ryan to his children. "Grandma had some problems, honey, but I think of you every day. Tell me about school." Lily talked fast about friends, a school project on the environment. Then Gabe, quieter but warm. Helen spoke to them both, her heart tight with love and loss. When she ended the call, Yvonne hugged her. "Never too late to get some time back, my friend." December brought holiday lights, crowded beaches, and the group planned a shared Christmas dinner, everyone bringing a dish to Oscar's place where he had a big outdoor area. Helen was excited, but sadness still pricked her, her first Christmas completely separated from Ryan and the grandkids. Patricia called occasionally in secret, letting Helen talk briefly to the kids. Precious moments painfully short. On December 20th, Helen was grocery shopping for French toast casserole when she bumped into someone. She apologized automatically, looked up and froze. Ryan. They stared at each other in the aisle, surrounded by ordinary shoppers. Ryan looked older, exhausted, with deep under-eye shadows and gray hair that hadn't been there months earlier. "Mom," he said. "Ryan?" The silence between them felt heavy, with everything unsaid. Finally, Ryan looked away. "How are you?" "I'm okay," Helen said. "And you?" More silence. Helen waited for an apology, for an explanation, for remorse. Instead, Ryan simply stood there, uncomfortable. "The kids are good," he said at last, growing fast. "I know," Helen replied. "Patricia lets me talk to them sometimes." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Patricia calls you. She's a good woman," Helen said quietly. "Kind." Ryan didn't answer. Helen saw the anger in him, not at what he had done, but at his wife for keeping a thread of connection alive. Helen decided not to fight. "I should go," she said, breaking the tension. "My friends are waiting." "Friends," he repeated, almost offended. "I made new friends," Helen said steady. "People who care about me." Something flickered across Ryan's face, pain, regret, anger, she couldn't tell. He nodded once and walked away. Helen stood there a moment, heart racing, then continued her shopping with hands trembling. That night she called Yvonne and told her. "What did you feel seeing him?" Yvonne asked. Helen thought carefully. Pain, but not the old pain. It felt like seeing a stranger who used to matter. "I felt pity. He looked so unhappy. Maybe he's realizing what he lost. Or maybe he's just tired. And honestly, I'm not sure I even care to know anymore." And it was true. Helen had freed herself emotionally from Ryan. She still loved him somewhere deep, but she no longer needed his approval to breathe. She had built a life without him, and that life mattered. Christmas arrived with a perfect blue sky and a gentle breeze. The shared dinner at Oscar's home was unforgettable: turkey from Marlene, sweet bread from Teresa, Oscar's stuffing, Helen's French toast, casserole salads, fruit soda wine. 14 people, elderly, lonely, and their original families united in their chosen one. Oscar raised a toast, voice shaking. When my wife died 5 years ago, I thought my joy was over. But you all showed me family isn't just blood, it's choice presence and real love. Applause, tears, laughter. They ate, told stories, sang holiday songs. Helen looked around at these people who had become precious to her and felt peace. Yes, she missed her grandkids. Yes, it hurt that Ryan wasn't there. But she had this moment, this genuine connection, and it was enough. When she returned home after midnight, she saw a text from an unknown number. The message made her cry, "Grandma, it's Gabe. I got your number from Mom. Merry Christmas. We love you so much and hope we can see you soon. One day when I'm 18, I'll visit you all the time, I promise. Lily sends kisses too." Helen pressed the phone to her chest, smiling through tears. Her grandkids hadn't forgotten her. One day when they were adults, they could choose her. She only needed patience, and to keep living with dignity and joy. New Year's came on the beach. The group watched fireworks with thousands of others. At midnight, under exploding colors, Helen hugged Yvonne and made quiet wishes, health, peace, and strength to keep building this surprising new life. January 2026 began with an unexpected opportunity. Julia invited Helen to join a seniors' art exhibition at the Community Arts Center in March. Helen was stunned. "Me, my paintings aren't good enough." Julia laughed. "Helen, your work is beautiful, full of emotion and skill. You've improved so much. Please." Nervous but excited, Helen began 3 paintings for the show, one of the boardwalk with her friend group, another of the sunset over the ocean from her window, and a third abstract piece, loneliness transforming into companionship. Meanwhile, Patricia still called secretly. In one conversation, she let something slip. "Ryan's been really stressed. I think he's having problems at work. He's more irritable than ever." Helen felt worry but didn't know what to do. She couldn't just call Ryan. He'd made it clear he wanted no contact. Then days later, Ryan called her. Late at night. His voice sounded different, tired, defeated. "Mom, yes, honey. I need to talk. Can I come tomorrow?" Helen was shocked. "Yes, you can come." The next day, Ryan arrived, looking thinner, worn down. He sat on the couch without being invited and stayed silent for a long time. "What happened?" Helen asked. Ryan exhaled. "I lost my job. I got fired 2 weeks ago. I have bills, 2 kids in private school, a car payment rent behind, and I realized I don't have anyone. Patricia is furious. My kids barely speak to me. My friends disappeared when they heard I'm unemployed." He swallowed, voice breaking. "And you? I saw you at the store. You looked happy, different. And I can't stop thinking about what I did to you at that cemetery." Helen didn't interrupt. Ryan's shoulders began to shake. "I was a monster, Mom. I know that now. When life was good for me, it was easy to discard you, to say I didn't need anyone. But now that I'm drowning, I realize I pushed away the one person who was there for me unconditionally." He cried hard, the kind of sobs that split a person open. Helen stared at her son broken in front of her and felt complicated emotions, pain for what he did, but also compassion for his suffering. "I'm not here to ask for money," he forced out. "I know you don't have much. I'm here to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. What I did was unforgivable, but I need you to know I regret it every day." Helen went to the kitchen, returned with 2 cups of water, handed him one, and sat across from him. "Ryan, look at me." He lifted red, swollen eyes. "What you did to me that day was one of the worst pains I've ever felt, worse than losing your father because you chose to hurt me. You chose to abandon me. For weeks I thought I wouldn't survive it." "I know," Ryan whispered. "Let me finish," Helen said, voice firm. "I suffered. I cried. I felt disposable, worthless, a burden. But do you know what happened next? I found people who showed me I still had value. I made true friends. I discovered talents I didn't know I had. I built a life that has meaning even without you in it." Ryan lowered his head, ashamed. "I forgive you," Helen said, "not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I deserve not to carry this bitterness that only keeps hurting me. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean we go back to how it was." Ryan looked up, fragile. "What does it mean then?" "It means we can rebuild," Helen said, "but it will be different. Not the mother begging for crumbs of affection. I'm a whole woman now with my own life, my own friends, my own plans. If you want to be part of that, you're welcome, but on my terms. With respect." Ryan nodded through tears. I understand. I accept it. I just want a chance to prove I can be a better son. Helen stood and hugged him for the first time in months. He clung to her like a scared child, crying into her shoulder like he hadn't since he was small. You'll find a new job, Helen whispered. You'll get through this, but you have to learn from it. Success isn't just money or status, it's real relationships. Being a good person, a good father, a good son. I'll try, Mom, Ryan said. I swear. After he left, Helen stood at her window watching the city lights. The journey had been brutal but necessary. She had discovered her strength, her ability to start over to find joy even after the darkest storm. And now maybe she could have her son back, but in a healthier, more balanced relationship. Her phone rang. It was Yvonne. So, friend, boardwalk tomorrow morning. Marlene's teaching a new stretching technique. Helen smiled. I'll be there. See you tomorrow. She hung up and returned to her canvases. The exhibition was close and she had work to do. Life kept moving, full of color and possibility, waiting to be painted onto the blank canvas of a new day. Helen learned that it's never too late to begin again. Never too late to find your own light after the darkest storm. And you, what city are you watching from? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. Share your thoughts about this story in the video description. Your support helps us keep bringing stories that touch the heart and make us reflect. Until the next story.